My name is Lisa Callahan, and I am the founder and the head coach here at the Women's Emotional Eating Community Support Group. I'm so happy to bring you this topic today, and it's a really good one, and I hope you enjoy it. It's called Happily Ever Now. And when I first heard this, it was actually just a couple of days ago. I was doing a workout on the Peloton. I don't know if any of you have a Peloton, but the workouts are done by instructors, and you can kind of put in headphones or whatever in your ears. Now, I have the one that I can go outside, and I was doing actually a run walk with the Peloton. And the instructor was talking about not judging or comparing this particular workout to the last workout you did or the one that you might do in the future. And she said, you have to live happily ever now. When I hear things, I tend to absorb them, and I really want to be able to think about those things later. So I'm really in tune with putting stuff into writing, and I want you to be in tune with that as well. So it's just as a suggestion, if you see anything along your path of your day and it sits with you, something about it like clicks and you're like, ooh, wow, that's interesting. Don't worry about what it is that's interesting about it or what it is that you're supposed to get from it or not get from it, whatever. Just write it down, and then you'll be able to see it later and you'll be able to go back to it. So what I did was I stopped running and I wrote this down in a notepad, and I decided that later on, as I started to think about it, I was like, wow, what this woman was talking about was so interesting, because what she was saying is that she said she used to set goals for herself, and that those goals would always be, it could be about anything really. It didn't just have to be about weight loss, but she would set weight loss goals. She would set food goals, like she was going to eat a certain way this week. She even set financial goals or places that she wanted to be in her life by a certain time goals. And she said she was always feeling like she wasn't happy now and that she would be happy when. And if you're doing this, which most of us have done this at times in our lives, when you feel like that, you will get to that goal. You will reach that place that you think the happiness lives. And then you'll get there and it won't be enough. And you'll want more, or you'll want different, or you'll want something else, or you'll get to that goal and you'll get there and then you'll be like, wow, this doesn't really make me happy. Or you'll try and talk yourself out of being happy with that place, even though it's something that you goaled for. I used to do this all the time with my weight. So I would plan into my head, I'm going to eat really well for the next so many days. Like I go on a cleanse, or I would go on some kind of a diet or something, knowing that I would probably lose a few pounds of water weight, right? I would make it to that goal, get on that scale, look at the number, be like, wait for it. I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, I reached my goal. No. I would be like, huh, I don't feel like I lost any weight. I don't feel like this is what that weight feels like. And I would actually talk myself out of being pleased with reaching my goal. So I was never living happily ever now. I was always living happily ever after. Like after this happens, then I'll feel this way. And then I would get to that place and I wouldn't feel that way anyways. Not only that, but at the same time, I would also then try and make another goal. It's like, oh, well, maybe I need to lose 5 more pounds, and maybe I need to lose 5 more pounds, or even if it was a number goal. Honestly, ladies, I have a group called Crush That Food Thing, right? The reason why I named it that is because this whole thing is not about the food, period, at all, end of story. Even though you might be carrying extra weight, even though you feel like you're eating, to the moon and you can't stop the eating part, it's just the eating and the food are being used as distractions to keep you stuck from ever getting to happily ever now. because you keep thinking, well, if I could just change my diet, if I could just eat the way that I'm supposed to eat, then I'll feel different, right? And I'll feel better about myself. And yeah, that's sort of true. And yet at the same time, how many times have you gone up and down the weight scale? How many times have you lost 20, 30 pounds, 50 pounds, 100 pounds, and then creeping it back on, right? And then you get to that weight and yeah, you feel confident, you feel happy, you feel good about yourself. And yet at the same time, there's always that like narrow little space that's like, but what next? What now? What do I want? What's more? And so this is why this topic of happily ever now is so important, because we want to make sure people end up living their lives, their entire lives backwards. They end up thinking that they need to do this, have that, achieve this, so on and so forth, in order to have happiness, because that's really what our goal is, right? We are all just trying to figure out how to be happy. I'm pretty certain that that's everybody's goal. And so it's interesting. I had one time, I walked into a seminar of some kind, and the lady, the first words out of her mouth were, all right, who in this room today does not have a toothache? And everybody was like, me, I guess. Like, is that, I don't know. I guess I don't have a toothache today, right? And she said, it was really interesting because she said that nobody thinks about things when they don't have them. So when we're all trying to find our joy and find our happiness, many times it's really because there's this lack of gratitude for the place that we're in right now. And this is really interesting, and you'll find it happening amongst friends, amongst relatives. When you start to engage with people, notice how much negative talk goes on. Notice how much, mindset stuff in your day happens. I didn't realize in myself how many negative things that I thought all day long. I would drop something and I would call myself stupid. I would, overbook myself and I'd be late for an appointment and I would tell myself how awful I was and what an idiot I am. And I would make it super difficult for me to ever be happy now because I made it so darn unbelievably impossible to ever get done what I needed to get done in one day because I was looking for disappointment. I was looking for self-sabotage. I was waiting for a time in my life that I could relax, but I didn't let myself relax. I continued day after day after day, setting my bar way too high for myself, so that my only option was to feel disappointed, and my only option was to really think that someday I'll be able to relax. Someday I'll be at the weight I want to be at. Someday all this exercise stuff will be easy. Someday that'll happen. And the truth is that what I didn't realize was that happily ever after what? What happens is when you get to that place, you end up doing something called upper limiting yourself. And if this is a problem for you, it's something that you're going to want to address. There's a book that's called The Big Leap. I recommend this to my coaching clients in Crush That Food Thing. And if you've not read this book yet, it's a really amazing book to read because he teaches you how we all sort of float through life with different levels of awareness. And sometimes we can get stuck in a level of awareness that takes us to a place where we reach our best version of ourselves, and then we snatch the rug out from ourselves and we sabotage all of our good efforts by putting this dark cloud over our head because deep down inside, we don't really feel like we deserve to be happily ever after, which is really why we need to focus on happily ever now. Because if we don't, and we're constantly chasing and chasing and chasing this future version of ourselves, or two things, trying to run away from the past version of ourselves, or trying to run towards the past version of ourselves, we're going to always end up in this place where we feel like we're spinning and we're like a hamster on a wheel. I just had a conversation today with a woman who was really just trying to envision what it would feel like to lose that last 10 pounds. And we had a whole talk about being happy where she's at this age of her life, at this stage of her life. I have to say that as I've moved along in my decades, and I'm almost at 5 decades now, I make sure at this stage of my life, when I was in my 40 decades, it was very different, or my 30s decade, it was very different. Now that I'm closer to my 50s, I really have this awareness that it's important to be the best version of myself right now. I'm 48 years old. I want to be the best version of myself at 48. And in order to do that, I need to do the first thing on the list, and I'm going to share this with you now. In order to live happily ever now, you have to, under no circumstances are you getting away with not doing this. You have to lower your expectations. Period. That may feel really, really scary to you, because you might think, well, Lisa, if I lower my expectations, like how much, where could I go? Like I'm already not doing what I want to do. How could I possibly lower my expectations? What I have to say about this is, if your expectations are set way out of your range, meaning that you expect that you're going to go from eating, Taco Bell 5 nights a week and nachos and sitting in a parking lot eating, 5 McDonald's cheeseburgers, to the very next day going to eating like rabbit food and salads and all that stuff every day for the rest of your life, not going to happen. Just saying. It's not realistic. Not only is it not realistic, it's downright mean. It's not okay to have yourself set on an on-off switch. You are a human being. And I know that if you got your expectations set way too high, that you're not looking at yourself as a human being, and that's not okay. Even though it seems like somewhere deep, dark, dirty in your past that you deserve to treat yourself this way, you don't. And I don't care what secrets you've got lurking in your closet. Secrets are very heavy, and you can only carry them for so long. So please, if you're thinking somewhere along the line that you are better than this, you can do better, you don't need to ease into things, you can just go skidding right into it, not going to happen. I would prefer if you were able to tone it down, lower your expectations, be okay with yourself now. That's going to take some work, because if you're looking in the mirror every day and you're seeing something you hate, and then you're feeling angry with yourself for eating the things that you think you don't want to eat, and then you're feeling like you want to punish yourself the next day or the next day or the next day after that by starving yourself or by putting yourself on rabbit food, that's going to be a self-sabotage like no other, because you're going to hurt yourself for days on end by trying to be so perfect with your very high expectations that you set for yourself. And at the same time, you're also going to come sliding back into this place that you're very familiar with, right? You're very familiar with the uncomfortable feeling and how it feels to self-sabotage. And that's exactly what you're doing. You got to think about this clearly. So lowering your expectations, allowing yourself grace, and allowing yourself the ability to be able to respond to yourself with a little bit more loving kindness than you are doing with just feeling like, oh, I ate like garbage today and the next day I've got to like make up for it. I used to do that all the time. I had this thing where I would binge eat and then I would punish myself with exercise. Now, I didn't know that this was a purge. I didn't realize that until I started to look up binge eating and emotional eating disorder, like an actual thing. And I recognized myself. I was like, wow, I'm doing this. And then I realized that the old binging, purging thing, I wasn't throwing up. I was just like, well, now I got to make up for it. Now I got to like take this and turn it into, 7 hours of exercise. And then I actually sometimes wore that like a badge, like a medal. I was like, oh, I ran for 3 hours, and it was not for the right reasons. So it's not that the idea that you have isn't worthy. It's just that the way that you're going about it is actually stopping your presence from being here now, because you're thinking about what's the future going to hold and how that's going to look. And then you're also punishing yourself for the past. So it doesn't work. So lowering your expectations will help you to be able to stay in the present moment and to be able to be the best version of yourself today. So whatever that day looks like for you and whatever strength you have to just make this one day. One of the Peloton instructors said, also yesterday I was listening, and she said sometimes when she's like, let's say running or doing something or whatever, I'm just saying exercise just because that's what she was saying. But she said, she goes, I look at the clock and I just say, you could do one more minute. Anybody can do 1 minute, 1 minute. And then she would get to that minute. And then she would go, okay, anybody can do one more minute. And then she would get to that minute. So even if you have to take things one moment at a time, that's okay. That's how I used to coach little kids. I have had 4-year-olds run 5Ks. You know what a 5K is? It's 3.2 miles. I've had little 4 and 5-year-olds run it. And the way that I would do it with them was I'd be like, okay, let's look at this. Do you see that tree right there? Let's run to the tree. And then we would run to the tree. And then I'd say, okay, let's walk to the next 2 trees. And we'd count the next 2 trees. And I'd say, okay, let's walk to 3 trees down. And we run to, run or walk to 3 trees down. One little step at a time. And if you're not doing this to yourself, for yourself, then you're not living in the now. You're not living happily ever now. And I want to ask you, why? Why are you doing that to yourself? I mean, I understand it because I did it for years, but I want you to understand it so that you can stop it like I did. Another thing that you're going to want to do to live happily ever now is you're going to want to, hold on. Oh, limit, I can't see with my glasses on. You're going to want to limit your comparison of yourself to others. And with this being said, what that's going to allow you to do is that's going to allow you to judge less of yourself and judge others less. When you are judging less, the opposite of judgment is going to be acceptance. And you might say to me, well, Lisa, I can't accept myself the way I am now. I need to lose 50 pounds. Well, I can't accept myself. So what I'll suggest, though, is that you try on that version of you that you want to be on for size in very small chunks. So maybe you haven't lost 50 pounds yet and you're not sitting there in that, oh, when I lose 50 pounds, then I'm going to be happy. And yet at the same time, you're staying present in the moment because let's face it, food is something that you will want to navigate through. Remember we talked the other day about taking foods and putting them into your mouth and having those yucky foods, the ones that this is not rocket science again. It's not a mystery that eating a bag of Doritos or eating a tub of Ben & Jerry's ice cream or so on and so forth is not doing damage to the inside of your body. So if you think about it as the decoration that you're decorating your inside of your body with, it's almost like going to the store and getting toxic paint and just plump it in. You're going to paint the inside of your veins and your intestines and your throat and your mouth, right? You're going to throw poisonous, toxic stuff into your body. And we know that these things are not good for you. Like, when you ladies come into this group, you're like, I need to stop eating junk food. I need to stop eating all this stuff. So when you're making that legitimate decision to eat that stuff and you know that it's terrible for you, but then you're comparing what it is that you want because you see it on the outside of you. You're like, oh wow, I just wish I could see that picture of myself and not have this belly. Or I wish I could look like my neighbor Jane who walks every day. She's so determined. Why can't I be like her? And then what you do is you end up judging yourself. You end up judging yourself so harshly. And it ends up being a contradiction to what you say you want. Because on one hand, it's like you say you want this. And on the other hand, then you're making choices that are not aligned with how you want to feel today. Like you have this vision of yourself as you want to see yourself happily ever after when you lose the weight, but you're making choices today that are not clearly not taking you anywhere near that vision. So there's a mismatch. And we have to get to the bottom of it, because if we don't get to the bottom of it and we don't understand why it is that you're comparing and why it is that you're judging, why is it that you're upper limiting yourself, if we don't understand all that, nothing's going to change. And then you'll keep saying the same thing over and over again. I wish I could have this. I want to have that. Someday I'll be blah, blah, blah. And someday never comes. And then you've spent your entire life, most of the women that I coach are in their 60s. And it's totally fine. I get it. It's just that you end up spending like now, you're going to 70, 80, 90, like when is the time going to come, right? So if you're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for something to happen, it can't work that way. It has to happen now. So watch where you're comparing yourself to others. Watch where you're judging yourself and see if you can lower that, limit the amount of times that you're thinking about things outside of yourself that are causing you to stay stuck, because it's not working for you, period. It's just not. The next thing would be to be responsible for your happiness, right? Happily ever now. Be responsible for your happiness. And I'm going to give you a different way. I've said this on different trainings before, just in case you forgot. Think about the word responsibility and think about it as being your ability. Take the word responsibility, take the ability, put it in the front. Responsibility is your ability to respond. Your ability to respond. Now, how do you want to respond to yourself? How do you want to show up now? Not when you lose 50 pounds, right now. How do you want to show up to yourself right now? How are you going to work on being the best version of yourself today so that you can meet that future vision of yourself, that future version of yourself? You will never meet that future version of yourself until you accept yourself as you are today, which means that you are going to have to work on responding to yourself with love and kindness today. Because if you're looking in the mirror every day saying that you hate yourself, you hate your life, you hate what you look like, you just want to lose these 50 pounds and then you'll be fine, blah, 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 that's not going to work. Because that's not giving yourself the top notch of your ability, right? Your ability is more better than that, because we know you can do this for other people. You're kind and generous and nice to other people, so you have to be able to do that for yourself today, not happily ever after. Today. The next thing is to make certain that you're not taking ownership of someone else's problems. And this happens a lot when we're thinking of this happily ever after feeling and we're not able to feel the happily ever now. What we end up doing is we end up being worried. We end up becoming extreme worrywarts for everything that's going on. We worry about politics. We worry about what's going on in the world. We worry about our neighbors. We worry about our children. We worry about our husbands. We worry about worry. We literally have the badge of worry and we're wearing it, and it is big. It's a big badge. But the truth is that, and trust me when I say about like world problems and such, there are ways to involve yourself in a dynamic way, in an energetic way, to conquer world problems without sitting and eating them. And take me, for example. This is my life. I have dedicated my life because of the struggles that I went through, because of the problems that I had, I couldn't conquer the world problems with the foods and the industries and how, they're I feel like they're poisoning people. I have an opinion about what I feel about big food and also big pharma. Like, I have an opinion about that. And yet at the same time, if I was standing there just grumbling away about how the foods are toxic and we shouldn't be feeding them to the kids and all this stuff, which is what I used to do. But then secretly, on my own time, I was binging on those very same foods. So I was a hypocrite. Not only was I getting nothing accomplished, but I was betraying myself. The more words that came out of my mouth to my clients, because I was a personal trainer, and I would tell my clients, this is what you eat, this is what you do. And I would stick to those things. 80% of the time when I was on a strict diet, I knew what to eat. I knew what it was, and I could preach a good preach, let me tell you. But then, every once in a while, more than every once in a while, I would just take all that in, and then here I went and ate 17 cookies, and it was like, what am I talking about? And then I would try and bloop that out of my mind like it didn't happen. But I was so worried about the world and what everybody else was eating and what my children were eating and making sure I had healthy for them, and then I really wasn't doing it myself. Not to the extent where it was aligning with my integrity. Like, I had the knowledge, I had the head knowledge, but I didn't have the heart knowledge for myself. And that was an important part that I was missing, and I don't want you to miss that. So you can't take ownership of other people's problems until you really navigate through your own problems and make certain that you're here for you first. Then you can help influence others, but not before you fix yourself, not before you figure this out. And that's really important, because so many times we keep ourselves distracted with busy. We have so many things to worry about. Sometimes I'll get on the phone with women and I ask them, what do you feel like your top 3 problems are? And they're like, well, my mother-in-law this, my son that, and then there's the ladies at work, and I don't know what to do about the dog, and I don't know. I mean, it's just like goes on. And I haven't heard one thing about themselves, not one. So taking ownership of other people's problems is a really, really amazing way to distract yourself from putting on your own oxygen mask. And if you're going to distract yourself from putting on your own oxygen mask, you will never, ever be able to live happily ever now. So just make sure that you know that it's a trade-off. You cannot have both. I don't care what you think. You cannot have both, period. Now, once you put on your oxygen mask, you're not going to change. You will still be a caring, kind-hearted human being. It's just that now you're doing it for the world and you're not hurting yourself with it. There's a huge difference. There's a huge difference to your integrity of who you are as a human being and what you want to show up to the world with. Because if you're drowning, you can't pick up other people into your boat, period. And that's important, because so many times when we feel like we're not happy now, we're going to do happily ever after, like I'll be happy when, it doesn't work. So a couple of things that we can think about is in order to become happily ever now, I want to give you a little quote. It's, happiness is a choice you make and a skill you develop. So let's think about what skills you need to develop in order to be happy now. Number 1, you have to believe that you deserve to be happy. And this is huge, because so many times we became shameful, guilty, blamed for something. Maybe we hurt somebody in our lives. Like, we all have done this. And sometimes what that does is it creates a feeling inside of us that's called a limiting belief. And we truly deep down believe that we don't really deserve to be happy. So as we start to approach happiness, we self-sabotage, we'll squash it. So what we have to do is we have to work through these limiting beliefs. And we do that through a process of self-discovery. That's what we do here in Crush That Food Thing Self-Discovery System, and of course in the women's group, because I love to give these trainings for free, and I love to encourage everybody to open their mindset to a new level of awareness and a new way to think about this. Because if you're the one that's squashing your happiness. In the Crush That Food Thing self-discovery system, we call this putting on your joy block. If you're the one that's blocking your own joy, then that's going to be a problem. And if that problem, if the only thing that you can think of to solve that problem is to first make sure that everybody else's problems are solved, well, that's going to be a double whammy. So you have to be able to say to yourself, do I truly wholeheartedly believe that I am meant to be happy? And if you do, fantastic. Let's keep moving that through. And if you don't, fantastic. Let's figure out why that is. And we will do that with you in coaching. That's how we figure it out. We get underneath the surface. We get to the root cause of what the problem is so that you can free yourself from your own personal justice system. Nobody else is holding the keys to your prison. You are, period. And I know that we have different circumstances, and I know that people are struggling, and I know that you might look at me and say, oh yeah, Lisa, sure, your life. I have had many things that have happened in my life that were not something that I would have envisioned from a little girl happening in my life. I just have, period. I'm not going to share in this light, and yet if you work with me, you will hear my stories, because it's important for us to get underneath the root, and it's important for us to recognize that as human beings, like arm in arm, like we need to link together, and we need to be able to release ourselves from the personal prisons that we have put on ourselves from things that were not our fault. And that's important, very important. Okay, the second thing is no excuses. I kind of went into the second one without knowing it, but that really is it. We sometimes think like, well, how could I ever do this? How could I ever change? Nothing's going to change. And the more we tell ourselves that, the more it will be true. The more we tell ourselves that, the more that will be true. But the other caveat to that is that we don't have to believe everything we think. That is a choice. So if you're believing things that are causing you to feel stuck, if you're telling yourself over and over things that are causing you to feel bad about yourself, then you have to be able to, with a conscious level of awareness, make a choice as to why you're doing that. And if you're unwilling to make that recognition and that awareness of that, then that's something that we need to figure out also. Why are you choosing to not do that? And it just keeps going and going and going into layers and layers until we break free and we have an opening. Just one little glitch of a new level of awareness will help us to be able to make the changes that we need to make with food, with life, with anything, with otherwise, with relationships, with finances, with whatever. If you're blocking it and you're making excuses for it, well, there you will sit. And that's okay. It's just to remember, happiness is a choice you make and a skill you develop. So what skills do you need to develop in order to be able to move through this, right? The last thing is to draw your attention away from things that make you feel bad about yourself. This is going to come with other people. Honestly, there may be friends that you have in your life that you are just like constantly trying to please, or people in your life that you're trying to please. You're a people pleaser. That's where you feel like you get your good vibes from. And yet at the same time, it's the very same thing that exhausts you from ever having the energy to apply the attention to yourself. So now we want to figure out, what is that feeling coming from? Why are you trying to please all these people who are sucking the life out of you or sucking your energy out? And why do you think that you deserve that? Because that goes into the first one that we talked about. Do you feel like you deserve happiness, right? All right, so I think we had a nice discussion today about happily ever now. I see we have some people watching, and I'm so happy to answer any of your questions. So if anybody wants to reach out, I will be posting a link to my calendar, and you can always book a call. You can always send me an email. You can always send me a private message, or you can post something in the chat here. If you're watching this on the replay, please push replay so that I know that you're watching it and that I can reach out to you and get to see if you have any questions for me. All right, everybody, happily ever now. Enjoy. I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.